Hello and welcome back to the Star Family Wisdom Podcast. I'm Jenna Layden, your host. I'm so glad to be back with you. It's been a little different over the last couple of months as I've been engaging the spiritual practices and spiritual technologies of Jesus and the Holy Family. And today's episode is a fun one because we are inviting Eric Rankin to the show. Eric recently published a book called As Above, So Below, the Quantum Teachings of Jesus. And in this book, Eric shares that many of Jesus's teachings resonate with modern discoveries that have been made in the field of quantum mechanics. And as we learn more about the mysterious ways or not so mysterious ways our universe works, the incredible miracles that were performed by Jesus are now validated by science. We're starting to see the merging of spirituality and science. Eric has been doing groundbreaking research on what he calls sonic geometry, which suggests that not only is our geometric universe some sort of symphonic system functioning in harmony with itself, but that the system has actually been engineered by extraterrestrial beings or some higher intelligence. And Eric is credited with discovering and releasing some of what were like previously unknown connections between geometry and musical harmonics. And his videos have been viewed millions of times and translated into numerous languages. And his findings and research have been featured on Gaia and History Channel's Ancient Aliens. And he's also been a speaker at recent conferences like Contact in the Desert and Portal to Ascension and Disclosure Fest. And he now sits on the panels of some of today's, most important research organizations and works with some of the most important researchers in the fields of physics and mathematics and human origins and extraterrestrial contact. And I wanted to have Eric on the show to talk about his book and to talk about the geometric nature of our reality and to talk about the harmonics that we are now understanding about the nature of reality and how the modern research and science is validating all of Jesus's teachings. And it's not lost on me that as I started engaging the spiritual technologies of Jesus and the Holy Family, which, at their core are designed to bring our energy field back into its right harmonic structure, Eric and I connected. So this story, his research, the way in which he writes about Jesus's time on earth and his teachings and weaves in his own observations of quantum mechanics and our quantum reality, I think are on a whole new level and can really help open our eyes to why the miraculous is possible. It's one thing to just believe in miracles. It's one thing to just accept that miracles are possible, but it's another thing to know how they occur, right? And then to engage in the work, the practices that allow that to be our new normal. So on today's episode, Eric and I go deep on his book and talk all about his exploration of geometry. And of course, at Star Family Wisdom, we're all about the sacred geometry. It is absolutely foundational, a foundational tool to engage in your spiritual practice, to support your ability to come back into harmony, to support your ability to connect with higher intelligences, to support your ability to just bring harmony to the field around you. So we love working with sacred geometry at Star Family Wisdom for that reason, because it's an easy way to bring harmony to your field and start to open up some of those connections that maybe have been closed off. So enjoy this conversation with Eric. And if you're interested in learning more about the spiritual technologies of Jesus and the Holy Family and the lineage of masters who have in modern times proven these exact same miracles that Jesus performed. Check out the webinar at the link below called Yeshua's Ancient Holy Practices, where I give an overview of what these are and what they're intended to support for us as souls, and what that process of soul purification looks like. So you can learn more about those practices and get access to lots of important resources to help you engage them yourselves by following the link in the show notes. We also have all of Eric's information in the show notes, so check his website out. And I hope you enjoy this episode, and I'll see you on the other side. Welcome, Eric. It's so good to have you here. I've been looking forward to this conversation since April, since the Portal to Ascension conference.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that was a great conference. I love the smaller, more intimate conferences like that, where you actually get a chance to talk with people and meet and get a little bit of backstory rather than just jump from. I spoke at Contact in the Desert, which is amazing, but it's big and kind of hectic almost.
Yeah, huge. I didn't get to go this year, maybe next year, but for those who weren't with us at the Portal to Ascension conference, Eric was a speaker, I was a speaker, and Eric spoke about sonic geometry and the quantum teachings of Jesus. And this was interesting timing because I was at the conference speaking about my recent work engaging the ancient spiritual practices and technologies of Jesus and the Holy Family. So Eric and I connected there, and I got a copy of Eric's book, As Above, So Below, and it has been so profound for me, connecting the dots on his work and some of my recent work. So I wanted to have Eric on. Eric, I'm so fascinated by just how you got into your exploration of all of this. I want to start with geometry as just kind of a foundation, for folks before we get into the quantum teachings of Jesus. And we're sacred geometry nerds at Star Family Wisdom. We're all about the sacred geometry. So this is definitely meant to be. So start with how'd you get into it? How did you find sacred geometry? How'd you start your research?
Well, it's interesting, the geometric aspect, because the Jesus aspect goes back to being raised as in a Christian family kind of thing. That's sort of fundamentally been with me. But I got introduced into the sonic geometry work, and I failed. It's ironic every time I give a talk, because I not only hated math, but I failed math, failed geometry in high school, never took anything, and I only went to college for 6 months, and none of those were math classes. So it's funny that I will stand in front of hundreds of people and talk about geometry or physics, just because that wasn't in my background. I got turned on to a place called the Integratron out in Joshua Tree, California, and it is known as a frequency machine. So when you go, you're exposed to the ideas of frequency. And I did write a book called The Aquarians, which was all about dolphins. It was a 2012 apocalypse story to a degree, and dolphins know something about the Earth, the past, present, and potentially future. And dolphins and whales are Earth's masters of frequency. I mean, where we consider mostly just what we can hear with our ears and pleasing music and tones, very limited bandwidth of frequencies.
Right.
Most of the hearing in hertz cycles, vibrations per second, are in the hundreds to low thousands. Dolphins are relating to each other in the tens of thousands, 50, 60, 70,000 hertz, literally seeing inside of each other like an ultrasound machine. We got that idea of an ultrasound from dolphins, and they can truly see into each other. When we talk about in woo or spiritual circles,
right,
transparently to each other, they literally do that.
That makes sense. I hadn't really thought about it that way. Yeah.
Yeah, you can't ask a dolphin. One dolphin could not ask another dolphin, "Hey, how you doing?" Why? Because they'd say, "Oh, I see you haven't eaten and you've got a disease, and your pulse is elevated and your heart's disease." It's truly the more you learn about dolphins, the more alien-like they are. So I became more interested in frequency after going to the Integratron. And I heard a voice the first time I went there. I heard a voice And I, at the time, this is going back 11, no, longer than that, 13 years ago or so. And it was find the frequency. This is a frequency machine, but there are certain frequencies that are more important in the activation of this device than others. And so I kind of went on a quest of just playing around with tones and experimenting with tones in there. I booked it privately and we did all kinds of stuff. Nothing was really doing much until a day that we took standard pitch tuning and we were playing a particular tone and dropped it with pitch wheels down. And we had tons of equipment. It was excessively loud, but something happened. We were playing an F sharp, and when we lowered it, the hair, there's a guy opposite of the building from me. It's about 40 feet around. We both got the spine tingles and the hair standing up. My hair standing
Eric,
up.
I just got it when you said F sharp.
Yeah, and we're like, what was that? So I realized it was in the neighborhood of F sharp, but it wasn't. But it was dropped tuning, and I wasn't even familiar with what we now call concert tuning or 432 centered tuning. So my search went on for other variations of F sharp, and one of them was 180 cycles per second, or 90, or 360. And all of a sudden, those are all octaves of that F sharp tone. All of a sudden, there was other information that I wasn't expecting to find. If you flash a light 180 times, plants grow faster, or, you know, all these different things. So I'm like, there's something to think about. And it wasn't till maybe 2 years later, and I was in my office building. I manage an office building. I have a quote unquote real job. And I heard a clearest voice I've ever heard, like, hey, Eric, go into your conference room and draw a triangle on the whiteboard. And I'm like, who am I listening to? What am I doing? But I did it. And I said, I have no idea why I'm doing it. Am I done? And they said, no, play that as a tone. And I'm like, play that as a tone? How would I even do that? Well, in our phones, we all have apps now where you can load instantaneously a tone generating app. I played 180 hertz. That's the sum total of a triangle of its three angles. We'll always 180. And I heard a tone, and I'm like, okay, am I done? They're like, no, go through all the flat plane geometry, the squares, circles, hexagons, all the way up to an octagon. I did that. And I realized that the tones were what we call a major chord in music. I'm a musician, and I'm not a great musician, but I know that much of music theory, that a major chord is like the most pleasing to our ears. And geometry was playing, all these shapes were playing one of these three tones to build a beautiful F sharp major chord. And I'm like, wow, that is fascinating, something I want to learn more about. I ran to my computer, looked up everything I could, geometry revealing major chord harmonics or anything. There was zero. And I'm like, this is crazy, because I know Pythagoras said there is geometry in the hum of strings.
Right.
This idea that geometry is somehow revealing significant tones. And somehow I became the guy that made that connection and discovered tones were.
I love it. Oh my gosh.
Most unlikely, you know, my guides that come in is like, truly, you are the least likely to succeed on our radio.
I love it. But you listened, you followed the guidance. And
I followed some guidance.
I don't think I ever told you when we connected that that's how my awakening started. You know, I was very closed off to everything spiritual. And then as that opening started to occur and I started to ask questions, boom, I started to get guidance. And at first it was like, really? Really?
Right.
I'm supposed to follow this? But look at where it leads you. Oh my goodness. So
guidance and discernment are then a part,
yes.
because, you know, you start hearing voices in your head and you're like, am I going crazy? Which I kind of thought.
Yeah.
A complex bunch of information came in about an hour's time. My whiteboard looked like the guy in Beautiful Mind. Just, am I seeing the secrets?
Amazing.
Am I just going crazy?
That's so amazing. How did you arrive at the I guess discernment that it was helpful, supportive, positive in nature?
Great question.
Yeah.
That's actually the question. Is in my work and research, everything became perfectly like gears in a Swiss watch, interrelated. It's an affirmation process. If I did, and I was guided to do certain research, like why is a circle 360 degrees? That's a huge thing. because that's where geometry is measured by, a circle being 360 degrees. You drop into a story, you drop into a narrative, you drop into a certain math system that is not metrics. It's called sexagesimal math based on 12s and 60s. Where did that come from? Ancient culture, Samaria, 6,000 years ago. What else did they do? Virtually everything that we use today came from there, a civilization, first written language and technology. And all of it, all this information, as I followed it, the image I use, I don't know if I used it in the lecture there at Portal, but it's like the Ouroboros, a snake eating its tail. To me, like a logic loop. If you're in the loop, you'll keep getting affirmations and synchronistic and coincidental codes and clues that will show you more, but go back in on itself. It's not like you're fudging. Am I imagining this? Is it kind of close? Am I sort of on the track? This was precision without any deviation. And I'm like, this has to mean something. You cannot have this degree of coincidence mathematically, mythologically, spiritually, without it meaning something. So I feel I'm still on the pace of what is the ultimate meaning. But man, is it fascinating. And people much smarter than me have taken the information that was revealed to me and done much more amazing things with it.
Well, and what I've been starting to see is this like intersection between sacred geometry and this understanding of our human energy field, right? So it seems like your work started to help you understand the harmonic like ratios of how energy is structured, how energy flows in the universe, and how that relates to the human. So it seems like that exercise of finding the F sharp major, that my brain's not as good in that realm, but but when you found that particular kind of set of chords, it's like that's the harmony, right? Like we're talking about harmony ultimately.
It's literal harmony. I mean, in the truest sense. So physicists now, I mean, this is a fairly modern concept, maybe in the last 60, 70 years, that there's a geometric essence. It's always been there. If you look at the way plants grow and the Fibonacci spiral and the pineal patterning, it's always been there. But we start relating to in crystal formation. Geometry is the background field and consciousness. Now, that's a scary thing for physicists to talk about, but it seems like conscious geometry is the background field of everything we call existence, reality. So if the universe is geometric in nature and geometry reveals these harmonic principles, all of a sudden you have a system that is working in harmony with itself. And that was kind of a major revelation from this, is like, what a beautiful thought. Not only is everything connected, there's physicists like Nassim Haramein talk about, now we have, and everything is harmonic. It's a beautiful system that we can start teasing out, playing with aspects of it, tones and frequencies and math, number codes, plugging them in and going, holy moly, something is really here. And it's almost like a time release pill. Humanity has been either haunted or gifted by these number codes. Joseph Campbell, the guy who talked about the hero's journey, while he was studying myth culture, he realized that embedded in many religious teachings, spiritual practices, architecture, myth stories were these number codes.
Right.
All he could do was make note of them. Like, why is 432 here in this culture, in this culture, in this culture? Well, now we start putting pieces of this puzzle together because we have the technology to measure large things like the diameter of the sun or things that we couldn't do before. And we start plugging these numbers in and they fit absolutely perfectly. So we have to, as hard as it is, there's such an avalanche of evidence that we have to stand back and go, some form of intelligence knew this, possibly invented this and wanted us to know this at some point, but it was like timed released.
Right.
Where when they reached a certain level of technical ability, they will start to be able to see how all this fits together. And that's where we're at right now.
Right. Like we're recognizing there is an intelligent design. There is a blueprint. And like you talk about the blueprint of creation.
Yeah.
And so it seems as though the sacred geometry is the blueprint. So when we work with the blueprint, that brings our blueprint into alignment with the harmony it's supposed to be in alignment with, right?
You are just, now you're living in the matrix. So you can use the micro version of it, like the movie in the matrix. Once Neo realized, or Morpheus, or any of them realized they were in it, they can manipulate the parameters, the design of that small localized matrix. Now we're talking about the universal matrix.
Right.
True. Are there some building blocks that are constant throughout the universe? And sacred geometry in its multidimensional form. Now, most people only equate sacred geometry into a 2D flower of life, flat plane expression. But I believe, as I was opened up to between the creation of the two major videos we created, the sonic geometry videos, that it was always hinting, just like in the movie Contact, if you remember this, a scene where we had finally established communication with the Vegans, and they sent 63,000 pages of information that looked like should be something incredible, but we couldn't decipher it. And it was like, and the millionaire who was funding the research said, if we're going to communicate with a more advanced species, we have to do it their way. And they're functioning on multi-levels and multi-dimensions. And so the flower of life, here's a perfect example. This would be a petal of the flower of life. That's 60 degrees of arc. There's 6 of them in a circle that makes the continuing pattern. But this is actually a dimensional shape. It is flat on the page. It is a dimensional form. And this is the true smallest geometric form, which you could call the Holy Grail, because most physicists, mathematicians would say that's a tetrahedron. It's flat. It has to have surfaces, edges, and points to be a geometric solid. Well, this has surfaces, edges, and points, but by the introduction of curve, of femininity into it, and flow, like philosopher Alan Watts said, the whole universe is wiggly. What's our obsession with straightness?
I love that.
And Walter Russell, a physicist around the time of Tesla, said all motion is spiral and all direction is curve.
Yeah.
That's this in multi forms. What I was able to discover, which you didn't see, you want to see my close encounter moment?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Okay, so there is a structure called the vector equilibrium. Buckminster Fuller called the secrets of the universe. He thought it was the universal geometric code of the universe. It's comprised of 8 of these tetrahedrons, and it builds a structure that has a true 0 point in the middle. All of the vectors are equal length and equal offset of each other, and it just keeps building octaves of itself from any point, anywhere. So if it had a little edge to it, that would be the beginning of the exact same structure. So we're all in our own universe of this geometric structure. So I'm going to show you how that relates very quickly, if I can, to sacred geometry.
Oh, yes, please.
It's going to take a minute.
We actually offer sacred geometry drawing courses at Star Family Wisdom because we recognize the importance of engaging these patterns, these structures, for the purpose of bringing our energy field back into harmony. And when you draw it and work with the flower of life, vector equilibrium, you can access higher states of consciousness, higher intelligence, like that.
Well, because you're consciously thinking that you are in that field.
Right.
You tell yourself, I am in that field that all things are. Starts sounding very Jesus-y. Then you're able to potentially manipulate what we call reality.
Yeah.
You bend the rules, just like in the movie The Matrix. And you know how to fly, like Neo did at the end of the first Matrix. He could control and do what looked like a miracle to anybody else. He was just working with the structure of the Matrix. So rather than straight lines in the vector equilibrium, we're going to have now, in 12 of them, we're going to have 12 pulses, which makes a lot more sense because everything is pulse. And the core cluster would look a lot like this. we've replaced every straight line with that dimensional, what the inventor of it called the Tryon ray. So I had this shape and I said, I want to see what that does. So I did it the quickest way I could. And I got pipe cleaners and styrofoam balls. And here at the top is more or less that star cluster. You can probably see it there.
Oh, amazing. If you're not watching on YouTube, jump over to YouTube so you can see Eric show the geometric model.
So I'm looking at this and I'm seeing this multidimensional star cluster, and I'm like, I'm just going to let it build. This is Buckminster Fuller's model, but only on curvilinear space now in pulse. And I just let it build and design itself. And I had no idea that when I flipped it over from the flat table it was on, it was two-dimensional sacred geometry.
Oh, there it is. Oh, amazing. Look at that.
2D becomes actually 4D. There are 4 planes, orbits around each of these structures. So that star cluster takes you to flat, just like in the movie Contact. If you're thinking dimensionally, will take you to the star. So I don't usually show that because it's a little complicated, but we're here. And I will tell you.
Yeah, go ahead, Eric.
Real quick, I will. Anybody that thinks, well, that's his opinion, and who is he? He's already said he didn't know anything about geometry. Happened to have the privilege of some of the workshops I was in think tanks. One of the world's top physicists was on my podcast here in Laguna Beach. We met for dinner here in my little apartment. Super nice guy, Manas Kafatos. He's written more books about physics and spirituality, written books with Deepak Chopra, New York Times bestsellers, dean of physics, travels around the world talking about quantum physics. He saw that exact model I just showed you. And he goes, where did you get your physics degree? And I go, I never did. And he said, how did you build that? And I kind of gave him the quick version, like and he goes, that is the most elegant and beautiful model of the quantum universe I have ever seen.
Oh, Eric, oh my goodness.
And I'm not making that up. I have witnesses, Michelle Anderson, who spoke at Portal to Ascension. She was here that night.
Oh my goodness. Oh,
podcast.
wow.
So I believe all along that what sacred geometry is a blueprint, a flat 2D blueprint, trying to inform us of a much more complex but even more beautiful multidimensional structure.
I agree. And it resonates so deeply with me, on that level of this is truth, and when you start to work with it in your life and you recognize how it affects energy and it shifts your energy, you've got evidence that starts to build related to the geometry and recent evidence. Eric, this is another piece of validation, I think, for you and your work and how you've been guided and why we are connecting. When I started to engage these spiritual technologies from India that Yeshua, Jesus, and his crew, the disciples, all used back in the day, as these, were presented to the world by Sri Kaleshwar, he talks about these specific mantras being some of the most powerful in the world because they are based off of the root sounds of creation, meaning the root frequencies of creation, these frequencies that align with the geometric structure and harmony of the universe. And he talks about how, when we utilize these mantras, it is opening these channels, we're shifting the geometry to open energy channels. And he talks about yantras, which are involved in this practice, which most of them are just 2D sacred geometry on paper. The yantra is the physical blueprint of the sounds of God, so it all ties together. So we have this understanding now of, even some of these ancient spiritual practices being related to sacred geometry.
Well, it's almost as if we were guided to what could be the frequency. And when Joseph Campbell realized this number 432 came in, our tuning used to be based around concert tuning, 432. We find old instruments, thousands of years old, before anybody understood anything about hertz or anything, but a note in there, the central note would have been that 432A. We call that A in our scale. Could be called anything. or the octaves down. So half of 432, that would be the lower octave, that's 216. Half of that would be 108. And 108 is a clue that seems to be embedded all over the place, including,
Mala beads.
all the beads,
Yep.
exactly 108. The meditating Buddha, a lot of people think he's got, curly hair and, little tight curls. Those are snails that decided to climb up his spine and cool his head as he was meditating in the hot sun. Exactly 108 of those in that story. And 108 just shows up over and over and over again. You go into the Great Pyramid of Giza and you just move sound. You don't have to create a tone. You just snap your hands and it will send a non-tonal vibration out, and that will resonate back to you a perfect 108 cycles per second. So there is something about, and if Earth's signature frequency is somehow related to 432, it's incredible that half 432 is the number sequence 216, which is the diameter of the moon in miles, and double it is 864, and 864 is the number sequence of the sun in diameter in miles, just behind it. There's these type of clues that are just hiding in plain sight for us to take notice of and go, is it like a simulation? Are we living, if not a simulation, then certainly a designed creation?
Mm-hmm. Yes, yeah, that's not a coincidence. All that's not a coincidence, right? It's like when one of those things was found, maybe, scientists could say, well, that's interesting. But you start to stack the evidence, and it is very clear we're living in an intelligently designed universe, and it appears as though it is designed for this divine harmonic, that there is this pattern that we can align with that just creates harmony. And you talk about the number 12 in your book, As Above, So Below, and you talk about the number 12 appearing in the Bible over and over and over. You talk about Jesus having 12 disciples, and the number 12 also starting to not be a coincidence. So talk about the number 12 and what its significance is.
Yeah, so we here in the United States, we're the oddballs. We're one of the last cultures on the planets of civilization to still be in the imperial measuring system, 12 inches to a foot and all those base 12 things, where the rest of the world has pretty much gone metric, which is base 10. It would seem to make sense that base 10 would have been where we started because we have 10 fingers to count on. But there was a culture at the same time that most of humanity was coming out of this hunter-gatherer existence. There was a culture that just sprang up out of nowhere, almost archaeologically speaking, overnight in Syria, modern day Iraq, in the birth stories, the creation stories between the Tigris and Euphrates River, where Garden of Eden was. And we have these inventions, but they're all based on 12s, and 12 5 times is 60. So all these 12s and 60s launched all these number codes that we use and give us. So yeah, just the number itself. I was on Ancient Aliens on one of the episodes I was on. It was called The Divine Number, and it was all about 12. And you think of, it's so weird to me that no one ever asks, why do we measure, so there's 12 inches to a foot and a dozen eggs, and 12 times 12 is a gross, most common packaging, 12 months to a year, 12 zodiac signs. Why do we keep wanting to return to 12? And it just seems like it's because there's a harmonic aspect to the creation story in the number 12. And in mythology, 12 Knights of the Round Table and 12 disciples of Jesus and all the 12s, it just becomes something you can't ignore once you become aware of it.
Right. I was reading something recently about, even previous versions of our civilization would arrange like their kingdoms. Different kings would even choose 12 districts or whatever you want to call it, and like geographically arrange their kingdom, their cities, whatever, in some sort of segmentation of 12 to create that sort of harmonic. So it seems as though this ancient information kept with us for some period of time, but it's just been slowly lost until now.
Yeah, without a reason why. You could go to all these religions and go, why are there 12? Go to ancient Greece, mother of democracy, 12 gods and goddesses. Ancient Rome, second most, hugest civilization, the same 12 gods and goddesses with just different names. But this 12, and he was like, well, why did you pick 12? I don't think you'll get an answer. It's just like it felt right. It seemed like it fits into nature somehow. There's never the all encompassing explanation why 12 or why 60. But when you employ the 12s and 60s, all of a sudden the universe opens up. It really does, because you will get these affirmations and see these numbers over. No matter how complex you get with your computations, you will go, there it is again. There's 144, there's 72, there's multiples of 360, of 432. You can't avoid it. It almost becomes spooky. Do these advanced computations, and here these same numbers keep showing up.
Right. It's like it becomes very much in your face, where you can't ignore it, and it forces you to reconcile with those questions about life and existence. And
well, it invites you. It doesn't force you. It only people that, what do you want to call us, geeks and nerds and something like that want to think a little, a narrative. Yeah, curious. So the invitation has been there for 6,000 years. What we do with that invitation, say, yes, I would like to learn more about this. It doesn't seem like very many people have done. And yet the reward is humongous, because all of a sudden you are in the design. You are in the mother matrix, not the manufactured matrix. You are in like the mother matrix. And it doesn't answer all the questions. It doesn't answer about God, first cause, first vibration, any of that stuff. But it certainly takes you further into the mystery, for sure.
Right. And it is my opinion that by aligning with that mother matrix, I like the way you talk about that that is aligning ourselves with God. It's helping us, experience life from a more divine perspective, or positive perspective, whatever, word feels good, to you. It's about experiencing life in the harmonious way that the universe seems to be designed to support. And when you talk about the matrix, the manufactured matrix, for anyone who isn't, maybe aware of those sorts of terms, that to me speaks to the distortion that has happened on Earth, right? It's like there was maybe a perfected matrix on Earth at one point, but as we went into the more destructive aspects of human behavior and into our dark ages, which we know more about now with the cycles of time, it's like we created so much distortion in the energy field here on Earth that we lost connection with the actual matrix of reality.
And how did we lose that connection? Did we just fall asleep at the wheel, or were we intentionally taken off the scent? And I can't say I can answer that either way, but there's a good argument to be made for either. Or did we consciously deny? So we are unique. As far as we know, the human species is unique, is that we're conscious sentient beings that can make choice. Even when we see all this information and can view the universe as this beautifully designed, harmonious system, we still have the choice. Would you like to participate in the harmonious aspect of it? Or the choices you make, do you not know that they are dissonant to the harmonious aspect of the universe? And most people, I think, in their heart would go, no, I don't want to be dissonant. I don't want to be a virus, say in the Matrix. I don't want to be a cancer cell. I want to be a part of the health of it. But fear seeps in, and we acquiesce to fear in one way or another. We either then, the few that know this information said, we'll manage this from here. We know more than you. We're better equipped to manage you using this information. And that's religion in a nutshell. Often in the old models of religion, the select few will dole out the information to the dumbed down masses that they are just easier to control. I don't know where that model came from, but it seems like it also came from at the same time that the Sumerians were getting all this incredible information, inventions. They were also living in one of the first major models of the hierarchy of government of the few elite ruling the masses. And that, I don't think that was ever a part of supposed to be the macro system. You will see, like in nature, you'll see the pride of lions, and you have, the hierarchical, you'll have the male, but those are just the small tribe. You're not talking about the bigger picture of all the tribes functioning together harmoniously. Then you have to think differently. You have to think much bigger.
Right. We ended up in a place where we forgot that the fundamental, like, aspect of nature is cooperation. It's not competition. And it's
That's right.
and we bought into this idea that it is. And I'm just so excited that we're at this point in time, though. It's really difficult coming out of the Kali Yuga, the period of dark ages that we've been in, because of the level of distortion that has occurred. But oh my goodness, the opportunity we have right now to utilize these tools and this wisdom, that you've been able to download, and that has just exploded, across the world through other, research avenues. Like, we have this incredible opportunity to activate within us, these latent abilities, this version of human that I think we once were. I was just recording a video about DNA activation and epigenetics, and based on, what you're presenting, that points directly to DNA activation and utilizing these harmonic tools, I guess, that we have to bring our system online. It's like there's all these parts of ourselves that haven't been turned on, because we've been living out of harmony.
And to me, bringing it back to the book, as above, so below, the quantum teachings, that seems to be the message to me. Is one, if we look at Jesus and go, how could a person walk on water, do all these miracles? Well, if they were fully activated, and how it happened, who knows? But a fully actualized, or much more fully than us, maybe not fully actualized human being could do things that looked like miracles to everybody else. And more, so many times in the Gospels, and the canonized Gospels and the non-canonized Gospels, Thomas, Mary, Judas, on Philip, there's a few. He says, you can do these things. I'm not here to tell you I'm unique and the only one that can do these things, right down to walking on water. He's out in the storm. He approaches his team of disciples. They're already on the boat. He comes out and they're like, oh my God, you're walking on water. And Peter, one of his disciples, says, can I do that, master, teacher? And he goes, you can. And Peter gets out of the boat and walks on the water for a few steps, and then freaks out by the real what he's doing, and lets his monkey mind come back into it, and he sinks and Jesus grabs him. That's in the Bible. It's not mentioned very often in the Bible. You're steered by religion to think, no, Jesus is something so different, and none of us are like that. You can't walk on water. Well, in your book that you're quoting to me, a human did walk on the water. So obviously that potential is there. And one of the things that blends to me, because I have portraits of Jesus or a couple amidst my models, and I'm like, how do these communicate with each other? And it was when I read the Gospel of Thomas, which is one of the non-canonized Gospels. You have to go out and find it. And his disciples are getting ready to head out and do their ministry. And they said, how do we convince people that you more or less know what God knows, that God is within you so much that you are truly aware of what God is, and you are a true representative? And he says, tell them I am motion and rest. We're a physicist trying to break down the most fundamental aspect of what we are. Motion and rest is pulse. Pulse is frequency. Frequency is sound. Sound is vibration. 2,000 years later, Tesla said, if you want to understand the mysteries of the universe, think of energy, frequency, and vibration. Jesus said, motion and rest.
And motion is the masculine aspect of God, and rest is the feminine aspect of God. So then you have those two energies in
You need
balance.
both. You
Yeah.
have to have both. Otherwise, you're back in static form. This does not
Right.
create motion and rest, but this does. Waveform,
Right.
motion, rest point, motion, rest point. That's what this is. When we see a guitar string vibrating on an oscilloscope, it just looks 2D because that's the way it's being presented to us, but it's more like this. It's spiraling and bouncing and doing all kinds of things. But if you take that spiral and say, what is its most elemental geometric representation? It's this. Can't get smaller than 3, because if it's only 2 planes of existence, or, you know, it's back to 2D. If it's this, now you're in the multiverse.
We're in the multiverse now. We're not in Kansas anymore, Eric.
No, we never were. We were just asleep at the wheel.
Exactly. We're waking up now, thank goodness.
Hopefully.
Another thing you talk about in the book that I want to touch on, because I think it's a, for me, a beautiful perspective on the topic of ascension. You know, in our spiritual community, there's so much talk about ascension, and in Christianity, there's so much talk about the rapture. And I think that we've kind of gotten both topics a little mixed up at times, or we've had these really grandiose ideas about what that is. And you talk about the book of Revelation and some of the like apocalyptic references that go on in the Bible, and that passage where Jesus talks about one person being in the field, or 2 people being in the field, one will ascend, one will leave. I forget the exact words. But you have a really interesting perspective on that, so I'd love for you to share that.
That was so I was able, in the context of this simple book, it's a short book, 190 pages or so. I wanted to introduce some of there's about 5 or 6 of the mind-blowing quantum field theories. And I don't want to say dumb them down, but that expresses the essence of what it is, making it accessible.
Yeah.
So one of the most famous thought experiments is called Schrodinger's cat, a German physicist. It was a strictly thought experiment, but they were arguing about how could you know what is happening somewhere without seeing it. He goes, well, that's exactly right. So he had this model of a cat in a box with some poisoned food. And then you put the lid on it and say, now let's conjecture all you want. Is the cat alive? Did it eat the food? Did it die? Is the cat dead? All these things. And everyone had their formulations of why they could determine before the lid was removed what you're going to find. And he goes, it's only at the removing of the lid are you going to know. Until then, the cat is both dead and alive.
Both probabilities exist.
Both probabilities exist. And that's the point I made in where we are right now. And the point that Jesus said, 2 people in the field, it's like, and I don't use the word, even though my podcast is called Awakening Code Radio, I don't use the past tense version of enlightened or awakened. But the person that is on awakening path is going to start living a certain way, seeing certain things, comprehending this reality a certain way, while the other person is just taking their orders and doing their due diligence and working their ass off and paying their taxes and mortgage and everything else. And it's truly like they're living side by side in 2 different realities. And you won't know what side of the reality equation you were on until literally the word apocalypse doesn't mean the thinning of the veils or end of the world. It means, in Greek, to take the lid off something. And so that's where I think we're in a slow roll apocalypse right now, that it is happening all around us. And there are people waking up and going, I see, and this is how I'm going to live once I see and learn more. You never fully see it, all of it. Or you just go, nope, I'm going to just stay living, taking the blue every day and do what I'm told to do. And I stopped doing that pretty early in my life. And that was the biggest gift, is I felt like I kind of saw, my parents were both very workaday people, very proud people, very in their own way materialistic. The nicer stuff you had, the more you won the game. That's we're kind of, the American dream is kind of like,
yeah.
And I'm like, I'm not doing that. I don't need as much stuff. And it's a burden in the end. I did live a phase of my life having all the toys. I worked as a yacht broker, drove the Corvette and had the fancy boats and the motorhomes and all that stuff. And one by one, as those things went away, I realized I didn't feel sad, and there was almost a little bit of a celebration, have a simpler life. And now I live the most simplest version of my life I've ever lived, and it's the most beautiful.
I love that. I think that's such a cool reflection, to offer folks is the material stuff. Is it really worth it? Or is it just a burden? And I agree. I think I have a similar opinion about just the shifting in consciousness, and that I don't think the rapture is some grand event, where some people get taken somewhere and some people don't. Like, I think it is that it's just this natural evolution that's occurring on Earth right now, because we have this opportunity,
Right.
to open up to the consciousness of the universe, and that fundamental structure of reality that we've been kind of disconnected from. And it was, I guess I've done, a lot of work to shift my energy and work with geometry, and, start, utilizing these practices. The aspect of just experiencing reality really differently than other people. It's not just, I think about, like, being awake. It's like the miraculous does start to occur. Like, you're living in this flow of synchronicity and support and guidance, and like what you've experienced, and that is just a completely different way of operating and living. So it's like we're just living together in two different realities on Earth.
Truly. And when you think about it, you said both ascension and rapture,
Right.
both upward trajectories, and in many ways kind of negating this experience that we're actually in at the moment. And to me, what Christ consciousness actually means is to know those things, but live this to its fullest, this particular experience. And if there was a theme to Jesus' teachings, it says, if you're waiting to know what the heavenly kingdom is all about, stop, because you're living it right now. Here's the as above, so below part, or as below, so above. As you are living right now, are you living in fear? Are you living in the power of your suggestive mind to yourself? I used to follow Wayne Dyer a lot. He was instrumental in kind of opening me up in my 20s. And he told a story of just moving to Florida. And he was walking along the beach and met a woman and said, "Hey, I just moved here. How is it?" And she said, "It's amazing. The sunsets, the water, the dolphins, everything about it. You're going to love it here. I've lived here all my life, and it's absolutely beautiful." Walks a little further down the beach. Same question. Another woman he meets, and how is it here? And she goes, "Oh my, it's the worst place I've ever lived. It's nothing but immigrants and mosquitoes and muggy weather and this and the blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah." And he goes, both of those women were living a truth. They were living completely in a truth that they made up themselves, of what they chose to see, amplify, incorporate into their beingness. That's a huge gift and responsibility that we get to do that. But Jesus says what you do is you carry that into your ascension process. That is part of it. So as you're thinking here now in the below, you are going to carry into your eternalness, and it might take you might really be slowing down your ascension process by not celebrating and fully engaging this localized corner of the universe.
Right, because like we're here for this reason, to be humans
Absolutely.
and live this life. I like to talk about creator school. So a lot of people say, this is Earth school to learn lessons and grow, which I totally agree with. Like that's part of the evolutionary process. Like we're learning lessons, we're evolving as we do it all, and like we're here to create our
Yes.
our experience of reality. And like you said, it's like that perspective of a more heavenly reality or a perspective of a not so good reality. It's like we get to play in either one. We get to
Right.
create that.
Your infinity starts every new moment. I mean,
Yeah.
your infinity doesn't start, you die, and then you go, and that's the real payoff, is your heaven awaits you. You're shaping your infinity every single step, every choice you make in the here and now. And truly, I don't know if I fully stated it, but the Christ consciousness move to me is to know that you're in something like an engineered simulation, but live as if you didn't know that.
Right,
That
right.
you're fully engaged in the teachings of this, but bringing them down into here. So all of the overarching fundamentals, kindness, compassion, love, forgiveness, service, you bring those into this field, and then you're affecting the outer field as the above that. I mean, that wasn't a chance title. I know people have talked about this, but truly, Christ's message, Jesus' message, was truly as it is here on earth, as it is in heaven. So how you live here is greatly affecting your infinity. Why do you want to muck up infinite existence by your narrow view of what this miracle called life is?
Right.
As soon as that light switch goes off in your head, your life is never the same.
I love that.
It's a light switch. You're not fully awakened, but it is a trigger moment, like on a model railway station, that you switch tracks and you're forever on a different path.
Yeah. I love this. I want to talk so much more about all of this and the practices I've been engaging. So I think, Eric, you would have some like profound experiences as you engage them because of the work you've already done. Like there's this is not a coincidence that we're connecting. Speaking of there being no coincidences, and the activation that's occurring. Before we wrap up, though, I want to touch on one more thing that I think is important in your book. You point out the role of Mary Magdalene and the Marys, and it's not a big section of your book, but you just highlight the fact that there's kind of been an overlooked importance to their roles, and that Mary Magdalene was a very much a disciple, with similar power. So I want to maybe wrap up there, to honor the divine feminine and just honor their role in Jesus's life and in how you view that.
Yeah, well, you can't talk about creation, as Alan Watts would describe it, as a singularly sided event. For every this, there has to be the counterbalance in equal degree. So if we've been indoctrinated with this patriarchal system of men ruling the world and men creating religion and men oppressing women, they are just living in ignorance of the way the universe actually builds things. So for whether we want to address it or not, and Jesus seems to have been very aware of it, that for all of the masculine energy, you need that much feminine energy to make things continue to work. There has to be that. For an up, there has to be a down. For a left, there has to be a right. For a push, there has to be a pull. That's the way physics works. So to just go, well, we're not going to honor the feminine. Well, you're just being ridiculous. If you start to truly understand the way this universe works, you would want to acknowledge all the principles that we would call feminine, because that's where the magic is. If you go from this, a closed, rigid system, and just by inviting curve, feminine form, you unlock the secrets of the universe. I mean, how much more do you need than that?
There it is, right there. That's that's the quote of the century, quote of the millennia on Earth. I love it.
There you go. Well, I hear you're going to India. Have an amazing trip.
Oh, thank you, Eric. Yeah, I'm going back. I got guided to go back. It's been this really fast progression of working through these practices and experiencing some really extraordinary energy shifts. And I'll share this one little example with you, since you shared the water example, which is kind of fun. So in these systems, there is a set of mantras for the elements, because elements are the building blocks, of the physical reality. And so the 5 elements, earth, air, fire, water, ether, have mantra systems mantras that are associated with them. And when we use those mantras, it activates our connection to the elements, brings those elements into balance in our field in a new way. And then ultimately, if someone goes really far with the practices, like what Jesus was saying, you can get command over reality, walk on water, that sort of stuff, right? So I'm in this process of utilizing these mantras, and I'm doing the element mantras, and the day before this incident happened, I'd had one significant kind of physical thing happen when I was working with my ancestor altar. So I was starting to experience some kind of heightened like manifestation or interaction, between the spiritual realm and the physical. And so I'm doing the element mantras, and I'm doing the water mantra. And about halfway through the water mantra, I pause and I question, what had happened the day before? Like, what was that thing that I experienced? And then I continued to, do the water mantra. All of a sudden, I start to hear running water.
Mhm.
And I pause, and it's just me in the house with my cat. The cat's with me in the meditation room, and I get up and I go into the hallway. The hall bath faucet had turned on.
Oh my.
Full force, full force. And this is like a hard, it's not like a slippery faucet
Right.
or anything, it's like, you gotta,
You got to
really
really
pull on
turn.
it. So I'm like, oh my goodness, okay. We just had a major water activation happen, with this water mantra. And then that happened again outside one day when I was in an area where there was a sprinkler system, and I'm engaging this water mantra, and boom, the sprinklers turn on. So I've had a couple of examples recently of just experiencing some interesting interaction, between these frequencies, these energy channels that can open up, and what it affects in physical reality. So I'll tell you more when I get back from India from this next
How
trip.
long? Well, and don't forget, I open my lectures, always have, with Einstein's quote, "Coincidence is God's way of remaining anonymous."
I
So
love it.
tell you they're here through the process of coincidence. It's up to you to put those together and think, what am I getting an affirmation? Am I being guided to something? Yeah. How long are you going to be in India?
A little over a week. So this is for the full moon in July. So every year on that full moon, the first full moon of July, it's the guru full moon, and the energetics, like right after the solstice, which we're recording this on the solstice, which is really
Yeah, that's
interesting. Speaking of, consciousness and inviting the light in, the guru full moon is an energetic time where you can more potently connect with masters, gurus, in the field of consciousness. So I got guided to go back to be there for that, and do practices, be part of the events that are happening. So off I go back to India.
I look forward to hearing about your experience.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been beautiful so far, and what you're sharing has just been so validating, for what I've been, working throughout the course of this year. And I want to have more conversations, because I think, like, we're just scratching the surface
I'm
on
sure we will.
putting the pieces of the puzzle back together.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, thank you so much, Eric. And thank you everyone for tuning in and watching or listening. Check out the show notes for Eric's book. Get that. It's a beautiful reflection. He writes about Jesus's story, but also shares his own personal reflections throughout it. And you said it was a really cathartic experience for you, Eric. It was cathartic for me reading it. So I think that will be for others.
Thank you. Write that in a review on Amazon for me.
Yes, write a review for Eric, and check out the links to his other videos below, and a couple other sacred geometry resources, so that you can utilize this tool. So we want to utilize those tools, and allow ourselves to expand and activate ourselves in all of the most beautiful ways.
What we're here to do.
It's what we're here to do. All right, thanks everyone. Bye
Thank
for
you.
now. We'll see you in the next episode.